What you're about to hear sounds like something out of a Hollywood thriller, but it's 100% real. American soldiers rappelling from helicopters onto massive oil tankers in the middle of the ocean. Ships flying false flags, hiding their locations using GPS spoofing, secretly moving billions of dollars worth of oil across the world, and then the United States Navy shows up and takes it all. Today we're breaking down exactly why America is seizing Iranian oil ships, how they're doing it, and what it means for the world. Stay till the end, because this story connects oil, terrorism, sanctions, and global war in ways you won't believe. Let's go. To understand why America is seizing Iranian ships today, we need to go back to 1979. That year, Iran had a revolution. The pro-American Shah was overthrown. A new Islamic government took power under Ayatollah Khomeini, and almost immediately, Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. That single event poisoned the relationship between these two countries, and it has never recovered. Fast forward to today. The U.S. has placed some of the harshest economic sanctions in history on Iran. These sanctions are designed to do one thing: cut off Iran's money supply. And Iran's biggest source of money? Oil. Iran sits on the fourth largest proven oil reserves on the planet. Oil is the lifeblood of the Iranian economy. Without oil exports, the Iranian government cannot fund its military, cannot support allied groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis, and cannot develop its nuclear program. So America made it illegal for any country, any company, any ship to buy Iranian oil. But here's the problem. Iran didn't just stop selling oil. They got creative. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Shadow Fleet, also called the Dark Fleet or Ghost Fleet. This is a network of oil tankers that operate in the shadows of the global shipping industry. These ships are specially used to smuggle sanctioned oil, Iranian oil, Russian oil, Venezuelan oil around the world, while hiding their true identity. How do they do it? Let me break it down. Number 1, GPS spoofing. These ships broadcast a fake location to maritime tracking systems. On radar, they appear to be somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. In reality, they're docked in an Iranian port, loading up millions of barrels of crude oil. The U.S. has documented cases where ships were simultaneously tracked in two different oceans at the same time. Number 2, false flags. Every ship in the world must be registered under a country's flag. That country is responsible for the ship. Iran's shadow tankers register under countries like Guyana, Panama, or Cameroon, but they never actually get proper approval. They're flying flags they have no right to fly. This makes them legally stateless, and under international maritime law, stateless ships can be boarded and seized. Number 3, ship-to-ship transfers. Instead of going directly from Iran to the buyer, these tankers secretly transfer their oil cargo in the middle of the ocean from one ship to another to disguise where the oil originally came from. By the time the oil reaches China or India or Cuba, it looks like it came from somewhere completely different. Number 4, shell companies. The ships are owned by companies registered in places like the Marshall Islands, Nigeria, or Turkey, with complex ownership chains designed to hide the real operators. Tracing them is like peeling an endless onion. This shadow fleet has been moving hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Iranian oil every single month, funding the IRGC, funding Hezbollah, funding the Houthis in Yemen. And America watched all of this and eventually decided enough is enough. Let's talk about the seizure that started making headlines globally, the MV Skipper. The Skipper was a massive crude oil tanker and built in Japan in 2005, capable of carrying over 300,000 tons of cargo. Over the years, it had been involved in transporting sanctioned Iranian oil. In 2022, the U.S. Treasury sanctioned it, but the ship just changed its name from Odessa to Skipper and kept operating. By 2025, the Skipper had loaded oil from Iran at least twice. It had also delivered approximately 3 million barrels of Iranian crude oil to Syria in 2024, helping the Assad government and the IRGC at the same time. On December 10, 2025, the Skipper left a Venezuelan port carrying 1.8 million barrels of crude oil. It was flying a Guyanese flag, but Guyana's Maritime Authority confirmed the ship was not registered in their country. It was stateless. The U.S. had a court-issued seizure warrant ready. What happened next was straight out of a military movie. 10 personnel from the U.S. Coast Guard Maritime Security and Response Team, 10 U.S. Marine Corps Special Operations soldiers, and additional forces launched from the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the most powerful warships on Earth. They boarded the Skipper in international waters between the islands of Grenada and Trinidad. The crew offered no resistance. The ship was redirected to the coast of Texas. The U.S. government announced it intended to seize the oil and sell it, with proceeds going to the U.S. victims of state-sponsored terrorism fund. Attorney General Pam Bondi said it clearly. The era of secretly bankrolling regimes that pose clear threats to the United States is over. In 2024 alone, the U.S. had already seized and sold Iranian oil, generating $47 million in a single operation. But what started as targeted individual seizures escalated into something far bigger in 2026. In February 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes on Iran, targeting military facilities, nuclear sites, and leadership. The conflict changed everything. Iran's response was to do what it had threatened for years: close the Strait of Hormuz. Now let me tell you how critical this strait is. It is just 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. But through that narrow strip of water passes 20 million barrels of oil every single day. That's roughly 20% of all the world's seaborne oil trade. Countries like China, Japan, South Korea, India, they all depend on this route. Iran deployed its Revolutionary Guard Navy. Ships were warned not to pass. Mines were reportedly laid in the water. And Iran began seizing ships of its own, attacking vessels it accused of working with the U.S. or Israel. America's response? A full naval blockade of Iranian ports. Starting April 13, 2026, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command and U.S. Central Command began interdicting, that means stopping and boarding, any vessel attempting to enter or exit Iranian waters. The numbers tell the story. By April 17th, 13 vessels intercepted. By April 18th, 23 vessels intercepted. By April 20th, 27 vessels intercepted. On April 19th, the U.S. destroyer USS Spruance warned an Iranian-flagged cargo ship called the Tuska for 6 straight hours to stop. When it didn't comply, the destroyer fired its 5-inch naval gun into the ship's engine room, disabling it. Then the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit boarded and seized it. Iran fired attack drones at U.S. ships in retaliation. No damage was reported. By April 22nd, President Trump claimed the naval blockade was costing Iran $500 million every single day. Now here's where it gets complicated and controversial. Is what America is doing legal? The U.S. says absolutely yes. Here's their argument. First, many of these ships are stateless. They fly flags of countries that never registered them. Under international law, stateless vessels on the high seas can be boarded by any nation's naval forces. Second, the U.S. has court-issued seizure warrants. Federal judges signed off on these operations based on sanctions violations and material support for designated terrorist organizations like the IRGC. Third, these ships are funding terrorism. The IRGC is a designated foreign terrorist organization. Any ship funding the IRGC is, by U.S. law, subject to civil asset forfeiture. But critics, and several world powers, see it very differently. Iran called it an act of piracy, with no basis in international law. China condemned the seizures as a violation of international law and called the U.S. actions unilateralism and bullying. Russia called it lawlessness in the Caribbean Sea and said the U.S. was reviving piracy on the high seas. At a UN Security Council emergency meeting, multiple countries expressed concern about what this means for freedom of navigation, a principle that the U.S. itself has defended for decades. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this affects all of us. Oil prices. When the Strait of Hormuz, carrying 20% of the world's oil, gets blocked from both sides, prices spike. Businesses pay more. You pay more at the petrol pump. Every country that imports oil feels the pain. China's dilemma. China is the largest buyer of Iranian oil. 1/3 of China's total oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. China has been loudly opposing U.S. actions, but it also doesn't want to get directly involved in a military confrontation with America.